Now, Chuck, our presenter today, is a document lifecycle evangelist, and in that role, he advocates for best practices and tools covering the complete document drafting lifecycle. Chuck has over 35 years of legal IT experience under his belt, and he has experience, just like me, of working inside a firm as well as on the vendor side. If you have any questions regarding this topic during the session, please enter them in the question window on the right side, and we'll answer as many as we can in the time allotted during the Q&A session. And with that, over to you, Chuck. I'm just going to unmute you, Chuck. And okay, off you go.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Hi, everybody. Good to be with you today. So, like Simon said, we're going to be focusing on data breaches in the document lifecycle. And by the document lifecycle, we mean from final draft to first delivery documents and emails. The general agenda today is to first talk about what is a data breach, just to make sure that we all understand the terms that we're using. And then we'll take a closer look at common data leaks or data breach opportunities in the document lifecycle. We'll also be talking about recommended solutions and security mindfulness, getting people to think about what they're doing or even embed security in the way they work day to day. Specifically, what we're going to be covering today are documents and emails, because those are the most ubiquitous data containers in any organization. There's a whole host of other data storage areas, like your file system or your document management system, your practice management system, etc. We're focusing strictly on the document lifecycle, documents and how they're shared. We'll be talking about tips to minimize risk by limiting the amount of data that's stored in documents and also ensuring that it's accurate, and then ways to help people avoid sharing documents and emails inappropriately. We won't be talking, data breaches and data security is a huge topic, and we won't be talking about general security best practices or threat management like phishing or ransomware or penetration issues, and we won't be talking about encryption or hardware issues. We're strictly focusing on the document lifecycle. So let's talk about what a data breach is. Well, in its most general definition, it's the unauthorized exposure of information by any means in any form. Could be emails, could be documents that you print and leave laying around or get mailed to the wrong place, or documents, of course, that have been emailed or shared on a cloud storage location, for example, that hasn't been secured properly. It's also about data drives or removable media that have been left lying around or stolen. Now, I mentioned that we're not going to be talking about phishing or penetration, but that's another vector where information can be exposed to unauthorized people. And of course, loose lips sink ships. You can expose information just by talking inappropriately, for instance, talking about something confidential in an elevator or at a restaurant where you don't know who's sitting next to you or standing next to you. It's important to remember that it doesn't matter whether the data is innocuous or out of date or irrelevant in terms of what the definition of a data breach is. For instance, the GDPR is completely silent on the value of the data that's been exposed inappropriately. The fact of the inappropriate exposure is the problem. Now, the problem might be really serious if it's confidential information, or it might be somebody's birthday, which would be completely innocuous. And, it doesn't matter what the breach was. The fact of a breach indicates that you've got a problem about your security. Most breaches go unreported, either because the person who's exposed the information doesn't realize that they do it. For example, they emailed an attachment to somebody using an incorrect address and they just didn't catch it, and there's no warning coming back to them saying that it didn't get delivered, because it did get delivered, but to the wrong recipient. There can also be issues around embarrassment. If somebody sends something to the wrong person, they're not necessarily going to want to notify the IT department because they don't want to get in trouble. So document-related data breaches usually happen by accident. It's not necessarily about somebody targeting the organization. Of course, that's a really serious concern, but by and large, problems occur because people are using unsecured Wi-Fi, or they leave their laptop unlocked so somebody walking past can see what's on the screen. They have bad passwords. We're going to be focusing on the bottom half of this list, really, repurposing documents or retaining unnecessary information, issues around cleaning the information like metadata from email attachments or saving files to removable media, and obviously, like I mentioned, sending emails to the wrong recipients. Let's take a look at a data breach that I came across recently and that was really surprising to me, and also I thought illustrated a hidden problem that could be quite common. Here we have a document, and you can see that on the left, it's a DOCX document, and that's important. I'll tell you why it's in a moment. And over on the right, we've got a report from Word's built-in document inspector, and it says there's no comments, there's no embedded documents, there's no macros, and there's a bunch of stuff that's not showing in this screenshot where it says there's no problem, but it has identified document properties and personal information. And that's typically things like built-in properties, the title, the author, the keywords, but it can also be custom document properties that are used by document automation. So you can use Word's Document Inspector to remove all of these issues that it finds, and supposedly you have a clean document. However, when I did another report after cleaning the document using Word's Document Inspector, I found additional information that was extremely revealing. The Word Document Inspector doesn't cover document variables or VBA variables, and those are also something that's used by a lot of document automation systems like practice management systems, case management systems, template management systems. And here we can see that this was last updated in 1999. So that tells us that this document has been floating around for almost 20 years. And it was originally a DOC document. It was originally in a legacy format, and it's been saved as a DOCX. So this document has been repurposed by who knows how many people at who knows how many organizations. It certainly didn't originate with anything that I've done or Latera Microsystems did. Here we see that this document contains some personal data. For instance, Jane Simmons' name. Personal data is any data about a person as far as the GDPR is concerned. The European Court for Human Rights ruled back in 1992 that business usernames, for example, are personal data. You can't separate your business life from your personal life. Your name is your name. Now, in this example, I have anonymized this a little bit. So it wasn't actually Jane Simmons when I saw this, and it wasn't Mason Dixon or anything. But the other thing to point out about this is that one of those document variables exposes information about that firm's network, and that could be really important, for instance, in a litigation e-discovery situation, or it could be important for somebody who is penetrating the system and trying to find their way around. In any case, Word Document Inspector wasn't a thorough clean. And now we have a repurposed document that's making the rounds for almost 20 years, sharing this information. So let's talk about the document lifecycle as a whole. At Latera Microsystems, we've broken down the document lifecycle from first draft to final delivery into 3 phases. The create phase is about the research that goes into building the content of a document. That's not something that we necessarily cover here, but we're certainly taking a look at precedents, clauses, documents that are being created and edited on a day-to-day basis. It also covers document styling, making sure that the document is in-house style, for example. The check phase is really about checking to make sure that the content is correct and that the document is well formatted and behaving well. So it's about proofreading, and if there's issues, for instance, around numbering, repairing them. The collaborate phase is about sharing the document, usually by email as attachments, but it's also about comparing documents. Comparing documents is also part of the proofreading phase. But for instance, when you receive a document from outside, you want to check to make sure that the changes that you expect are there. But also when you're sharing with somebody, the last step before you email it should be compare it to make sure that you're sharing exactly what was agreed to be shared. And then in terms of file sharing, there is secured email, or encrypted email. So what are some common issues around the create phase? The primary one is repurposed documents. Everybody, well, yeah, everybody does it, even though they may know that they shouldn't. They go off to something that they created before, or they search the document management system or the file store for some document that somebody else has created, either last week, last month, last year, whatever. They copy it, they give it a new name, and they change the names and the data to suit whatever they're doing. That opens you up to a lot of potential data breach risk, like we just saw with that document that's been making the rounds for about 20 years. There's also issues around inappropriate access. That's, somebody shouldn't be having access to a data store, and then they grab something that they shouldn't have and start working away. That can be an internal data breach. In the check phase, there's not that many opportunities for problems, but incorrect or out-of-date content could lead to a data breach. The collaborate phase is where most of us would think that there would be data breaches. That's sharing content and metadata by mistake. Or it could involve you emailing something to someone and then they forward it to somebody else who shouldn't see it. A lot of the problems around the collaborate phase, and indeed all of these phases, is around people not following the procedures that they should, either because they don't know about them or because they perceive them to be too complicated or onerous. So, inappropriate access. We talked about somebody having access to a document that they shouldn't. For instance, HR documents. You wouldn't want people knowing what their colleagues are making, for example, or you wouldn't want to have people have access to their reviews, their annual reviews. So if you've got a DMS in place, it should be secured against inappropriate access. But there's also ethical wall violations. For instance, if you've got two teams working for different clients, both but working internally, they should have an ethical wall solution in place to prevent them sharing with each other by accident or on purpose. When we're talking about documents themselves and the issues around repurposed documents, we're talking really about zombie data, old information that hasn't been removed manually from the content, or metadata that hasn't been cleaned and it's still lurking there. But it's also about hidden and obfuscated text. Somebody may repurpose a document. They don't know that the text is obfuscated or hidden, and then they share it with somebody that they thought they were authorized to share that particular document that they were working on, but the hidden or obfuscated text should not have been shared with them. Legacy file formats, additional versions, that's something that was done away with by Microsoft in the latest document file formats. But additional versions can contain a history of the changes that were made in the document before the final version. Another example of something that could be considered hidden text is when you turn off the visibility for track changes. Somebody may not realize that they're working with active track changes, and they may think that when they delete something, it's actually gone. So let's talk about that. Here we've got an example of a document where the person has been working in track changes and they have all markups set in the tracking group so they can see the track changes and the comments. Here's that exact same document, no change except no markup has been selected there. They have no idea that that deleted text is still there or that that comment is still there. I know that I've done that myself. I have turned visibility off on track changes temporarily just to see what it looks like, and then forgot that I had left it as no markup. So let's talk about how we avoid data breaches in that phase. First, obviously, you have to ensure proper security around your document stores. That reduces the opportunity for anybody to have unauthorized access. We have to discourage document reuse, and that means providing people with the easy way to do the right thing. Make sure that your templates and your precedents are easily accessed, well formatted, well behaved, and they can insert the information that they need to in order to generate a document quickly and easily. That includes providing standardized clauses and language that they can use easily from whatever point they are in the document. Recently, I heard about a situation where a customer has a problem with users going off to other documents, searching for a standard clause, grabbing that standard clause from that other document and inserting it in the document that they're working on. That's a lot of wasted time on the user's part. And if you provide them with the ability to do that easily, they're more likely to use what you've standardized it on now rather than something that may be out of date, but the user thinks is okay. You want to make sure that you update all of your documents and your precedents to modern file formats, meaning DOCX. There's no good reason to be using a legacy format like DOC that includes vulnerabilities like additional versions or routing slips. And you want to make sure that before you publish any of your templates or your precedents, you need to clean them to make sure that you're starting off fresh. And that involves also using exclusions to retain your document automation. You don't want to just delete all custom properties or all document variables on your templates and precedents, because then that kills the automation. And when I talk about exclusions, I'll just show you a quick example. Here we have a list of VBA variables, and these are a document. This is the Innova document automation systems list of default document variables that it needs in order to maintain its automation. And here you can see that we have a system that allows you to selectively clean or leave them without killing the document automation. The check phase, proofreading, isn't really a very serious risk for data breaches, although there could be. For instance, if you have fields in a document that haven't been updated, they might contain old or inaccurate information. And if you don't update the fields and then send the document off, you could be exposing information that shouldn't be exposed. Also, incomplete redaction. You may need to redact information from a Word document or a PDF, but if you don't catch all of those instances, but you think you did, then you're sharing the document and you're sharing things that you shouldn't. So in order to avoid data breaches in the proofreading phase, you want to streamline proofreading with automated assistance as best you can. Obviously, people are responsible for going through their documents with as fine a tooth of comb as they should, but it helps to make it easy for people if you can automate a lot of the clerical work around that, or the hard work. So some examples: litigation citation errors. You want to make sure that these citations are correct and up to date. You want to make sure that dates and names are correct. And one way to do that is, for instance, with fields, make sure that fields are updated on open, print, and save, so that whenever you're printing the document, the fields get updated before the print happens, so that you can see the most up-to-date information and decide whether you want to share it. And you should also use document comparison in the check phase to make sure that the amendments that you intend are actually in place, and anything that you didn't intend isn't. So the collaborate phase, this is the sharing phase, the exposure to the outside world or people within your organization. And this is where we commonly think of data breaches occurring. Incomplete, inaccurate comparisons that don't flag errors in the amendment process. That's a big one. So before you send something out, you should always compare it to make sure that you're sending exactly what you intend to share. The hidden track changes and comments, we just saw an example of that. You want to make sure that that's taken care of by a metadata cleaner, for example, before it's shared, either on removable media or as an email attachment. Obviously, you want to make sure that metadata like track changes or comments is shared appropriately. You don't want to necessarily delete track changes and comments all the time, but you should let people know that they have attachments that include those things, and they can make those decisions on their own. You want to make sure that you're avoiding autocomplete errors, to help people avoid sending to the incorrect address. I think a lot of us have done that at one point or another. It's extremely embarrassing. It can be really hurtful to our businesses or our clients. If you can, you want to avoid uncontrolled forwarding of emails, email attachments. So if you can put some processes or systems in place that limit the amount of time that an attachment is available, that's a great thing, because it limits the opportunity for unauthorized sharing. So let's talk about track changes and comments. One common misconception that I hear again and again is that converting to PDF eliminates a lot of metadata like comments and track changes, and that's really not the case. Here on the left, you see a document with a Word document where you've got comments and track changes. On the right, that same document that was converted to PDF, and those comments and track changes are visible. Now, the author and the date isn't visible on the track change, for example, because that's not supported in a PDF. But when you save a document that contains comments and track changes to PDF, the comments and track changes are included in the PDF depending on whether they're visible in the Word document at the time you made the conversion. So that's why it's important when you're cleaning and converting, cleaning metadata and then converting to PDF, clean the document first, make sure that your comments and track changes and all those other things that a metadata cleaner cleans are gone before you convert to PDF. I mentioned using professional grade comparison to make sure that you're sharing the right content. You're not sharing things that you didn't intend. And we just covered cleaning metadata before converting to a PDF. We've just seen that Microsoft Office's check for issues or document inspector isn't enough. You have to use a professional grade metadata cleaner in order to make sure that you're cleaning everything that you need to clean and cleaning it appropriately. You want to embed metadata cleaning in the email flow and reduce the number of clicks that are required to do it, because that helps people comply with your processes. If something feels too difficult to do, or they're constantly pestered by message boxes, a lot of people will just click, click, click to escape. You want to warn people about inappropriate email addresses if you can. And like I said earlier, you want to limit access to attachments. You may even need to encrypt or require passwords in order to access an email. So the other thing you can do is selectively redact documents. Here you've got an option where you can, as part of the metadata cleaning, clean document content based on patterns that you find in the document, like social security numbers or national insurance numbers or whatever. That can be really helpful either when you're sending attachments out the door or when you're cleaning your file stores in order to make sure that you're getting rid of all the old data that you don't need to hold and retaining only the data that you do. For instance, with the GDPR, someone can require you to correct or delete personal data about them, but you may have documents in your data stores that you legitimately need to hold on. So the GDPR doesn't require you to delete those documents, not at all. But if you want to, you could go through your data stores and get rid of that person's data if it's not required. There's no legitimate business reason to hold on to it, and still retain the document using something like this. Here's an example of warning users when they're sending to the wrong recipient. Like if you want to prevent users absolutely from sending anything other than to a business email address, you'd never want somebody to send anything to a personal address. You could either warn them when they're sending to Gmail or Outlook.com or whatever, or absolutely just prevent it. Say, sorry, no, you can't send to that address. Here's an example of sending attachments as a link, but expiring the link so that the user only has a limited amount of time in order to to download the attachment. If they don't do that and then forward the email, the attachment is no longer there. So you reduce your risk of sharing a document through an unauthorized forwarding by including a link only and expiring the link. All of this is about good data governance. Good data governance is about only holding the data that you need, getting rid of everything you don't, making sure that it's available and usable when required, making sure that you do everything consistently and with integrity, and of course, applying proper security. The benefits of all of this, the benefits of taking a look at your document lifecycle and making sure that it's properly secured, is that you reduce friction. You reduce the amount of time you have to spend dealing with the potential of data breaches or the data breaches that have occurred. It also reduces the amount of searching and revealing that you have to do when you're required to do a search for instance, GDPR personal data. It's also about respect and trust. You know, we've all seen the issues around Facebook, Google, Cambridge Analytica. It's raised our awareness about how our personal data is being used and abused by all sorts of people, and that's a great thing. We have a higher expectation now, both people and clients, that any business that we do business with is being respectful and that we can trust them to do the right thing. We also need to make sure that we don't do anything that could put our jobs at risk or our clients' businesses at risk. And of course, we want to avoid penalties and damages. Even if there's no statutory penalty or damage associated with a particular data risk, the fact of the data breach indicates that there's a problem in the system. Either the software didn't work right or people didn't follow proper procedures. In any case, it's embarrassing. And it degrades your reputation in the world, in the big wide world, and it could cause you to lose business. So security mindfulness, it's everybody's responsibility. You don't want to make people paranoid because that starts making people nervous. But making people aware of their risks helps them avoid data breaches, and that's a continuing education opportunity. From an IT perspective, you want to make sure that you get rid of unnecessary data and encourage your clients to do so as well. One of the things I've been toying with in conversations with customers is if you have documents in your archives, there's no good reason to hold on to any of the metadata in those documents because they're no longer production documents. It might be a good idea, it's up to your business, to get rid of all the document automation metadata that you've got there, just to reduce the risk that it might be shared if somebody decides they want to repurpose that document. Like I said, that's something for you to discuss with your business. It's also something to think about. Everybody has a responsibility to be secure, and that's a positive benefit. And I think people are more and more open to that concept. But good tools make it easier to start secure and stay secure. Start clean, stay clean. And if you make it easy for people to do the right thing by embedding data breach prevention in people's workflows, then people are more likely to comply, especially if the process is transparent. Like I said, make it easy to do the right thing. Prevention is the best cure. Get rid of the data that you don't need. That reduces the risk of sharing it inappropriately. You want to listen to your users and make sure that you're responding to their needs. And a thoughtful integrated approach works best. You know, that's based on listening to your users and then working with their workflows to make sure that it's easy to do the right thing. For example, at one large firm, the adoption of secure email practices increased by 100-fold with simple addition of an Outlook add-in. So, any questions?
Thanks, Chuck. That was packed full of really useful information. We are actually out of time, so I have a couple of questions from people, but we'll have to answer them individually with people offline because we want to make sure we finish on time. So thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you on the next webinar.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.